Warning! Listening to the PM-Pro Show may cause sudden clarity in leadership and project management, plus side effects like higher pay, smoother transitions, better teamwork, and dangerously efficient results. I'm Tim Dalhouse, retired U.S. Marine and founder of PM-ProLearn, where we bridge the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom. Each episode delivers battle-tested strategies for success to help you lead, transition, and train like a pro. Welcome to the PM-Pro Show. Gear up with us to suck less and win more.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the PM-Pro Show. How do you lead your team through a $300 million crisis? I have with me today Clint Keeley. Clint, thank you so much for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast and the PM-ProLearn team.
What I want to ask you first, though, Clint, is I noticed, because I tried to do a little bit of background, you didn't put your rank all over your LinkedIn profile. I was a little bit interested as to that. Like, you put the operations officer, management, but I realized that you didn't just like throw it around like that. Can I ask you why?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a retired command sergeant major, and I loved my time in uniform, right? It's been over 2 decades wearing the uniform, and I love it. But for me, and this is me personally, it was a chapter of my life, not the entire book, right? And so, whereas I have experiences and lessons and mistakes that are plenty, I wanted that to define my next chapter of my book, so to speak. You know, it's great to have those people I can have those conversations with, share those same stories, commiserate with. But I'm also wanting to open the corporate aperture and not just define myself, oh, I'm a veteran and I'm stuck in this position. You know, I got all the Army swag, the coins, the guidons behind me, but, you know, it's also... it's Clint now. It's not Sergeant Major anymore. I don't want it to be that way. I just want to kind of have a fresh start almost.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely want to ask you more about that. So, hey, Clint, thanks for joining us. And let's just get started on this. You do organizational change management now at BAE Systems. What is organizational change management? I just want to not assume anything on that, right? How does that work?
Yeah. So look, I know I'm on a PM podcast, right? And I love my project managers, but so often we get tied around scope, you know, schedule, budget, you know, time. What does that look like? And it's the very technical side of the project, right? And so when you think about change management, we think about the people side of the project. So all things adoption, communication, training. We're doing this new program project. Think of software adoption. We're rolling this brand new software out. And cool, we're going to deliver the software and it's on your computer now. But how do we know you're going to use it? How do we know that you're going to use it for what it's worth? And so that's when change managers come in. We look at, hey, how are we doing surveys to find out if you're being communicated to? What's the training plan look like? And ultimately, you know, are you bought into this new software? Because if not, cool, we just spent millions of dollars on this new software and no one ever uses it, right? So really, they think about the people side of the project.
Okay. So then in terms of, it's like trying to make it practical. Is that what I'm hearing? Because with change management, we can do a project, but actually making the rest of the people like get in and have buy-in to, I guess that takes a little bit longer.
Yeah, and how many times have you been somewhere where a project is rolled out and you just hear about it the next, like it's coming out next week? You're like, well, wait a minute, this is impacting me next week. And I can think of, you know, so many experiences in the Army, something that came out the next week, and you're like, well, I never heard about this. I don't have a chance to buy in. No one had brought me along for the ride. And I think if you're brought along for the ride, you become more of a supporter, an enabler for that change versus pushing back and resistance, right? So I really think about, hey, how do I make sure not only is it, you know, realistic to adopt the software or whatever the change is, but it's also being a champion for the change. Hey, I want to communicate early and often so people are aware it's coming.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, Clint, that we talk about is bridging the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom, right? You're a veteran, you transitioned, you went through the process. Now, with this change management, right, even though you have your masters, you have, you know, project management certification. It seems like you didn't just limit yourself to project management though. Like you did several things after that. So I know that it could just be like, hey, especially in the job market, we're always looking for different things, but why didn't you just say, let me look for only project management related roles, even though you got certified in it? Why'd you expand out?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I, you know, kind of thinking about like, hey, the Time Old Classic, and shout out to Ken Killingsworth, who's in the program just recently. I love Ken, and he's a mentor of mine. We had a lot of discussions when I was getting out. I was like, what do we want to do when we grow up, right? And I say grow up in the term of retiring from the Army. Like, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I joined a consulting firm because I wanted the most exposure to corporate America in the shortest amount of time, right? I didn't want to go to some company and have to grind 5 years to get experience. I went to a fast-paced consulting firm that put me on PM roles, put me on change management roles, that put me on all different things, different industries. And what I found is that having both project management experience and change management experience made me more well-rounded. And it also made me fall in love with the people side of change versus kind of the traditional project manager focus.
Mm-hmm. How did you, in terms of that consulting gig, right? When you were having, I know you had to probably go through at least one round, if not rounds of interviews and the process. How did you relay that information? Because for me, I was just talking with a soldier, they were in E4, they got out, and a lot of their history on their resume I was looking at, was military history, but we had to talk about it and reword it a little bit to be more relevant to the position that they were looking for. Not that we were making anything up, but it was just like, I mean, if you just tell someone you're, medical logistics and you're trying to talk about project management, they'll just think that you're only doing medical related stuff, right? So how did that work for you on the translation aspect? Is whether into the interviews or resume? How did that work?
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think a lot of service members really struggle with this part right here. Like, hey, I've got all this experience. I've got all these accolades and, training and certifications, but it's not a one-to-one corporate conversation, right? And so it becomes a nuanced. To be honest, during my transition phase, I was going on 3-4 mile walks with my headphones in, and I was listening to people in industry talk about how they prepared for interviews, what terminology used, what lexicon they used, and more importantly, what not to say, right? And so we have a whole host of acronyms and sayings in the Army, right? Like you can just think about, a football bat, a soup sandwich. You can think about all these things you've heard in your Army career that may not be great for the corporate workspace. And so I just listened to these things and I wrote out 3 or 4 experiences that I knew I could talk about really well. And I said, okay, how do I translate this to someone could understand? And I went out and found mentors in the civilian space who would let me just have a cup of coffee for 30 minutes and try with them like, hey, how does this sound? Can you give me feedback on this? And so learning to tell the story in corporate America is crucial to that. I went through a lot of rounds with my resume, like, hey, what right? And I still don't know what right looks like, right? Like you asked 100 people, you're going to get 100 different opinions of what your resume should have on it or shouldn't have on it. But I truly think like experience, right? Just talking to people. Does this look right? Does this sound right? And I also add this caution to those who are transitioning. Don't look to fluff the resume, right? Like people want to get out. You want to make 6 figures. You want to have this awesome lifestyle. But maybe it's smarter to take a little lower down entry level into the workforce. And then you get there and you're superpowered. You're just adaptable. You learn to do it real fast. And then you can grow really fast within the company. So really get that foot, kind of get that bridge across in the corporate America, and then look at shooting upwards really fast.
Oh, thanks for that. So you transitioned, right? You went from, operations management, project management into consulting. How big of a shift was that for you in your normal day-to-day? What do you think?
And look, first 6 to 12 months blew my ears back, man. And sadly, a lot of veterans fall into the gap of, switching jobs before 2 years, right? They give up on themselves. My wife made me make a promise that I would spend 12 months at consulting and give it my best before I even thought about leaving. Like, hey, it's gonna be hairy, it's gonna be scary. Learn this transition. I will say that, I showed up humble. As a senior enlisted, we don't make a lot of products. We don't make a lot of PowerPoints or Excel documents. And I had to go to some younger consultants who were in their 20s, mind I'm in my 40s, and hey, teach me how to make a pivot table again in Excel. Teach me the best way to make this PowerPoint, right? Like I had to humble myself.
Wow.
But once I learned those skills and the amount of YouTube videos I watched is my algorithm is nothing but PowerPoint and Excel document for a while. But once I learned those things, then I could apply my leadership lessons I learned for 20 plus years in the Army. Then I could apply all these other great tangible things I have. But if you don't have those baseline, hey, I can make this great PowerPoint deck, I can make this great Excel document, then you're never going to get a chance to brief in front of somebody, to present in somebody, to really wow them with your charismatic ability that you've been honed from leadership, right? And so a lot of humble pie. I came in a little lower on the salary than I wanted to, but it gave me some grace period to learn and then rapidly go up at consulting.
Yeah. So actually, since you mentioned that, the hard skills and soft skills, right? In the military, sometimes it feels like, hey, when I'm getting out, all I have was that. And, whether I was, I just did the UNISAS report or I was just the maintenance guy, right? But, You talked a little bit about like the leadership skills that are honed there. How is it that being in the military actually does prepare you for whether it's leadership at the lower levels or higher levels? How is that actually beneficial no matter what, I guess you could say, the rank is?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, our worst day in corporate America will never be what it was in the Army at a training center getting rained on, eating MRE. It's now, right? In TC, like, you're never going to be as miserable as you were at a training center, or if you've been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, some country. It's never those conditions, right? And so you have resilience. I think a lot of service members need to realize they have skills and abilities. They have learned to operate in austere environments, and everything else is teachable, right? If you give yourself some grace and find a good mentor who is willing to spend some time and effort, you're going to learn. But I think a lot of people automatically discount themselves. Well, I don't have that skill, or I don't have that knowledge set, and that prevents them from ever making that leap forward. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that we constantly don't think about is, if you're an NCO and you went to your first basically your education system, or you went through all the way through the NCO education system or officer education system, you did a lot of learning. You did a lot of reading or writing. Don't discount yourself if you don't have that MBA from insert prestigious university. You know how to write, you know how to read, you know how to comprehend, and then put information back in an important way. So this, trust yourself, trust what you've been taught, and then pay it forward. Now, if you're a junior enlisted, you're just getting out, you got a great thing called the GI Bill. Go to school. I mean, it's the number one thing that's going to separate yourself if you want to be in a white collar America, right? Or if not, use it, go learn a trade, go HVAC, go do something. They're making a lot of money out here in Texas right now, building all these houses, right? Like, go do some skill set that you have benefits to do.
Did you do the PMP while you were currently serving, or did you do it right after you got out?
Yeah, I had been at my consulting firm for 6 months before I got my PMP.
Oh, okay.
And I got there and I realized, well, I'm a biggest proponent of education, right? Bettering yourself, do things that separate yourself from somebody else, right? A famous quote somebody told me is, even if you're convicted of a crime, go to a prison, they can't take your degree away from you, right? And so it's always stuck in the back of my head, right? But one thing I was realizing is the PMP carries some street cred, right? Like, I had a master's, cool, and I had all this experience, but I didn't understand the lingo. I didn't understand really some of the PMP things that the value it adds, right? And I was scared, right? Like, I was definitely terrified of putting myself out there, because this was the first exam I was going to take that my company was paying for. It wasn't like tuition assistance. It wasn't something the Army was doing for me. It was my company. And so 6 months, I'm like, hey, it's time to pony up and, really expand yourself. And I'm very thankful I did.
So let me then ask this, even though you didn't get the PMP until after, which is more than fine enough, right? I think I heard you mention, like, I have the master's, cool, but even with the lingo, it's still like, necessary. So I'm not here to bash on the master's, but it's sort of like what I think I hear you saying. I mean, I need you to clarify, is like, the master's is good, but still being able to showcase that language understanding and that, experience, I guess that sort of like adds a little bit more. Would you call that, like, I guess, the icing on the cake? Would you say the whole cake itself? What do you think?
Yeah, I think one way when I think about separating education certificates is, undergraduate, masters, there's a certain amount of reading and writing you have to do, right? Like, there's a famous, saying that if you're not reading, you're not leading, right? But I think reading in a degree program forces you, these books out behind me force you to become somewhat of a generalist. You have to learn, you have to expand your knowledge, but that's wide, right? That's wide knowledge. It's like, I have wave top knowledge of all these areas. I've learned this, I've learned this, I've learned this. But now when I go on my certifications, I'm going deep in that experience, right? Now I'm thinking about my PMP. I'm pulling up the PMBOK, and now I'm learning earned value management, or now I'm learning risk and opportunities, and how does that impact my schedule risk analysis, right? And so, whereas education is, I'll never talk someone out of getting their master's. I think it helps separate you from individuals. But if you're trying to crack yourself into a field, whether it's IT project management, construction project management, healthcare project management, HR project management, that PMP helps you to have that deep knowledge versus this wide knowledge that you can get from maybe a graduate course.
Even though you didn't have the project management certification, right? You ended up leading out over a $300 million project during the Hawaii water crisis. I was actually stationed at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, from about 2019 to 2022. So I actually knew some guys that worked in water is like the water treatment centers. How would you say that? Yes, I'm still a project manager, even though I don't have a cert, because I think a lot of soldiers have that problem saying, I don't think I'm a project manager, even though they do have that background.
Yeah, I think one thing that really transcends, right? I don't think civilian project management, military project management is always a clean one-to-one fit, right? Not everything is, right? And that's okay. But I think there are things like, stakeholders, right? Like it doesn't matter if in the civilian world or the Army, you have stakeholders who influence the project, right? Whether that's internal to your organization or external who have a vote, right? And so you have to manage a disparate set of stakeholders for your successful outcome. Talk to that strength. Tell me about how you had to get people on board with this project or program, or how did you convince someone to come support you when it wasn't their responsibility to, right? I think that's a huge thing. When we got the call, we were the Ready Battalion, and there was contaminated water lines at AMR in Hawaii, and we had to mobilize the CAV squadron, and we had to go down there and for the entire month of December, we were going door to door, handing out bottles of water, driving kids to school who were displaced because they couldn't take baths. They couldn't use their faucet. Like, it was real, right? And there were so many organizations that we had to leverage that weren't within our command, right? We couldn't tell them, hey, you have to do this. We had to use that stakeholder management. Like,
it was all chaos.
Yeah. And how can you control that chaos into some sort of semblance of order, right? And so, think about that. It was a hectic time, but it was also, it was a good time, right? You learned a lot. I think leveraging, some of those skill sets you have in the military, stakeholder management. I think another thing that we struggle with is, a lot of times we don't have true budget control like you do in the civilian world. Like, hey, I'm not really checking to make sure we're underneath spending. But you are accountable for resource management, right? And so what are those resources you have to track,
equipment,
or order? People, equipment, supplies? Maybe you're not tracking the actual spend rate you're doing, but you're managing some sort of resource, right? Speak to that. Speak to that importance, right? And learn how to quantify that for your resume and or for your job interviews.
Yeah. Generally what we have seen, or at least what I have seen in terms of talking with people, is the engineer seems like it's a giveaway. Like, hey, if you're an engineer, yeah, definitely you're a project manager. But sometimes the medical NCO, right, the sergeant first class, or the legal officer, they're like, I don't know if I've managed a project. And then I asked their background, and they planned events from, company events, brigade balls, you name it, like training events. It really is almost like just trying to build that confidence, saying you do it. You just need to learn what the term is, right? Is that what you like for PMP? Like, when you wrote your application, was like the water crisis one of the projects that you mentioned as like proving that experience? Were there any others that come to your mind?
Yeah. So one of the ones, well, two actually, right? Like, while I was we went to an integrated weapon strategy. And so we had to redo how we did small arms marksmanship, right? And so
it's a project.
Yeah, think about all these NCOs who've been shooting and qualifying the weapons this way, and now we had to go this way, required training plans, required projects and program oversight, right? And so that was one. And then, I'm an old guy, right? I was there while we transferred into PRT, right? And so think about the training and readiness of all these people who knew how to do physical training the old way, and now we got to figure out
the new ACFT standard.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so how we roll this out, right? And so we have project and program experience. It's just, how do we tell that story in the civilian way? And I think that's the most impact. I encourage people to learn the art of storytelling. How you tell a story will win you friends and open doors for you.
No, I get that. I actually we were talking with somebody. His name was Eddie. He was one of our other guests, and he mentioned like your body of work, right? You have to be able to tell someone what your body of work is, but that takes a little bit of vulnerability too, because it's like, okay, I've done my job, but like, who am I? And I can get like a little bit scary. So not asking you to go super deep and to tell us like, who are you? But like, I see from looking at your experience a little bit, I see operations management, I see consulting, I see mentorship. Now I see change management. Like, what would you say is, Clint, from that perspective now? Like, what is your body of work? Because who is Clint now?
Yeah, I mean, who am I now, right? Like, I think who I tell you I am today is not who I'm gonna tell you I am in a year, right? And I think that's the coolest thing about being in the Army, right? Like, for so long you're this certain person. I'm all about people these days, right? Like, hey, how do we get people to buy in and succeed, right? And now, I mean, there's always going to be difficulties we have, and we're gonna have challenges, and that doesn't mean you're successful. But that's what I'm focused on. Is like, hey, how are we getting people to buy into change and succeed? And this idea of like, this is who I am, I think it's almost freeing because once you're out of the Army, you can be whatever you want. I mean, go do, like, literally, you want to go learn to fly an airplane, go fly an airplane, right? You want to be a project manager, go be a project manager. Like, the door's wide open. And I think a lot of people, that overwhelms them and it scares them in that transition phase. They're like, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't, that's too much. Then cool. Go find a job, go find something that you're passionate about and test it out for a year. Do you like it? Cool. Maybe there's something there for you.
But what do you think from your experience specifically said, yeah, like I've done this, I'm ready for this, I can handle this?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're not always a popular leader when you're in the military, right? There's things that you personally, professionally may not agree with. I mean, it's just going to happen. But trying to sell the commander's intent, trying to, you know, influence without authority sometimes, I think really hones that ability for change management. There's a huge acronym we use in the civilian world. It's called "What's in it for me?" And when I'm trying to get you to buy into something, I want to explain to you, this is why you want to do this new process, tool, software, whatever you want to say. But here's how it's going to help you. Robert's going to give you 10% less errors, 15% less edits to do on this podcast, and it's going to make overall production 20% more efficient. And you're going to be like, wow, I'm really bought into this. You do the same thing in the Army. You've got to convince your soldiers. I know we laid out all of our equipment 3 times already, but we have to do it for the 4th time for change of command. And you're going to have NCOs, you're going to have soldiers, you're going to have like, why are we doing this again, right? And like, hey, here's why we're doing this. I don't want you to get hit with charges. I want to make sure the commander knows he can trust you. It's the same thing in corporate America. The only problem is you may run into somebody who's been doing something for 30 years a certain way. And now, how do I tell Sue in accounting she's about to change what she's been doing for 30 years, right? And now you got to leverage that muscle.
Find that why again.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's a change management practice that you would like if you could give it to a platoon sergeant? But I think you already mentioned it, which is defining that why, right?
Well, I know. I think there's something there, Robert.
Okay.
There's a lot of change management methodologies. You have Cotter, you have ProSci, you have a LaMarche, but ProSci really focuses on the individual side of change, right?
Yeah, tell me about that one.
Yeah, super easy acronym called ADCAR, right? And so if any company commander or first sergeant just looked at an ADCAR lens, it'd be fantastic. And so ADCAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And super easy, real quick. Hey, I'm first going to build awareness. Hey guys, in 6 months, we're going to NTC for a training exercise, right? Now people know. They can tell their families, they can tell their friends, they can get dog sitters. You're letting people be part of what the upcoming change that's happening. We're leaving here, we're going somewhere for 30 days, right? So now we've got awareness, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the easiest part. Just tell somebody. That's all you have to do. Tell them and communicate to them, right? Now, kind of tricky is the desire. Why does Specialist Joe Snuffy care about going to NTC, right? And that's where you as a leader have to talk about how they're part of the bigger team, or they're part of contributing to our success and building that desire, right? And so, cool, now they're aware of what's going on and I'm building desire. Mm-hmm. All right, so now it's knowledge. So whatever task we're doing in TC, whether it's gunnery, force on force, whatever we're doing there, we have to now have our NCOs and leaders teach that knowledge. So now we're going to be successful for this. Awesome. But now we have knowledge. Do you have the ability to apply it? And that's going to the field. Hey, we're going to apply this knowledge. Can we do this in the field environment? Can we do all these things that we're supposed to? And lastly, it's reinforcement, right? It's reinforcing the communication, updating with changes, making sure we're practicing a couple of times. If we applied ADCAR to any change we did in the Army,
that makes it so much softer, so much better, easier to do.
It's so much easier, so much better to buy them.
So then let me ask you then more about the mentorship side of the house then, right? Because you've actually sat in some seats where you were, I think, a co-leader for, was it an ERG, the Employment Readiness Group? Did you ever have to meet with veterans and like, were you mentoring them through the process of transitioning, or were they already out and you were mentoring them in the job search? What did that look like?
Yeah. So really the way ACP works is they look to pair you with a transition service member who's about 12 months out of service, right? Some a little longer, and they try to find those who are interested in what you've transitioned to. So whether it's in consulting, change management, project management. And so I have now formally mentored for the last 2 years, a transitioning E8 out of the Navy and a E7 out of the Army. And so it's just really all things you think about retiring or separating from how to make that transition into corporate America, all your benefits, and really just sharing your lessons learned, kind of being vulnerable and like, hey, here's where I got it wrong, right? And here's some things I think I did pretty good, right? And it's kind of sharing and hoping they can learn from you and kind of have a sounding board to ask questions. And I think more importantly, to know they're not alone in that space. You get kind of isolated when you're retiring after 2+ decades in the military, knowing that somebody else has gone through this with you and they're going to talk it out with you.
The phrase that came to my head that I'm trying to phrase into a question is like, leadership can get lonely, especially now that you're towards the end of your career, getting out, or you've been out now, right? You went from having an entire command, right? Or an entire, whether even if it's like younger, platoon, squad, to now it goes back to being on your own. So I imagine, right, there was a lot of conversations and phone calls and just like, collaboration, because now it's just them. And I think they only see you at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, and I transitioned from the Army, but part of our Army song is the Army goes rolling along, right? Like it's in the song. Like one day you're indispensable, they need you. And the next day you're about to get out and the Army's like, okay, hey, high five. Thanks for what you did. We got to keep going. You know what I mean? And so you find yourself in this transition space with this huge network of people you had drastically gets a lot slower, right? Gets a lot smaller. And so that small group is those close friends that you've had throughout your career and that you've developed really good, right? But there's some people on the outside who maybe were acquaintances or you talked to because it was a convenience or they were at staff and you needed their help, right? And so I think, first of all, knowing and accepting that this huge network you had is going to shrink. It's going to. And I tell people, give yourself some grace, right? You're going to go from this process of having all these people you talk to on a daily basis, and now you're going to transition fairs, you're doing this kind of stuff, and people stop calling you, right? And so I think it's one thing you can kind of give back and help them through that.
You already mentioned earlier that it's like, hey, you can be what you want now. You have that freedom. But I've had plenty of conversations where all of that freedom is scary, right? In terms of it seems like too much choices. And I've had conversations with people looking for jobs. Like, I wish this job, it was exactly in this, not even exactly this location. I wish it forced me to go this direction so I have to travel because they're afraid to move or whatever. So it's like, I think the question that I'm trying to get to is that fear of making a big life decision when we've been in a scenario when it's like, hey, go to this place. You're now stationed here. You're now deployed there. How do you get over that? I guess, like, how do you get over that fear of freedom, right? Because you've been free for a while now.
Yeah. I think, it's really tough in my shoes, right? Because I've been out for 3 years, right? And so I, I've lost some of that, like, it's just like, it's tough, right? Like I've lost some of that relevancy because it's a couple years behind me now. But one thing I always tell people I mentor, whether it's through ACP, informal mentoring, is I can't make that decision for you, right? At the end of the day, we can have 30 conversations on what industry you should go to, what jobs you should apply to, how we should work on your resume together. I can't make the decision to click apply. I can't make the decision to practice for your interview rehearsal, right? Like that's on them. And so I think starting with like ownership, you own your transition. Nobody else owns your transition. That's the biggest thing. And when we communicate like, hey, we're ownership ways, it helps so much, right? Like, cause you have to be like, hey, do I want to be successful? And that's the starting point. I also think when we talk about this freedom thing, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant, Robert?
Yeah, one bite at a time.
One bite at a time. You do not have to solve for the next 30 years of your career. Like when you're getting out, cool. Like you don't know if you want to continue living in Savannah, Georgia, then get a 6-month lease. Get a year lease. You don't have to be a knucklehead like me and buy 10 acres and build a house on it, right? Like, you don't have to do that, right? And so a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I have to figure the rest of my life out. No, you don't, right? Think about it in project management terms. Do some work breakdown structure, right? Right? Like, hey, my WBS, here's the task I'm going to do for the next 6 months, right? My breakdown schedule. And I'm going to do this and this. And at the end of 6 months, let's reevaluate. And after that, we can think about the next 12 months. And I think that freedom thing, people think about this all encompassing, where am I going to retire? Where am I going to settle? And don't get it wrong. You're thinking about family, you're thinking about kids, you're thinking about job market. It's a lot to think about. But if you and your spouse or whoever you're retiring with, your family, your friends, have those conversations, right? And think about, all right, what's something we just want to get accomplished this first year? And then from there, right? And so I think it's having that levity of, hey man, one bite at a time, it's going to be okay. And ownership starts with me.
Awesome. Hey, Clint, before we conclude, I want to ask you, do you have any, we were just talking about, hey, setting like smaller goals. Do you have any goals that you're looking forward to as you're still running on this other side?
Yeah, well, so I'm currently in a doctoral program with the LSU Shreveport. And so I'm in my 6th class, got about 2 more years. So, like I said, education, I'll never speak ill of. It's honing and making yourself better. And I'll also say, like, making that transition into leadership in corporate America is tough, right? And so I'm posturing myself to break into some leadership roles at BAE Systems. And that requires me, meeting with current leaders and like, hey, what are you looking for in corporate America as a leader versus like an individual contributor, what I do right now? And so I think, growing in my current job environment and then also growing educationally really are my goals for the next couple of years. And then, what I want to do when I grow up, I don't know, but I don't have to figure it out today.
Exactly. I love that. Hey, it's just one step at a time. Hey, Clint, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Hey, everybody, thank you for listening on the PM Pro Show. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. So thanks for joining us, man.
All right. Thank you very much.
You have a good one. Hey, guys, have a good night.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the PM Pro Show. We appreciate you spending time with us, and we hope you're walking away with something valuable to apply in your own life. If you enjoyed this conversation, the best way to support us, completely free, is by subscribing and sharing. As a veteran-owned small business, every bit of support helps us continue bringing great content to you and others in the community. Thanks again for being here, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep making an impact.